Welcome to the second season of Over to Europe. This podcast is produced by the community of CIVICA, the European University of Social Sciences. CIVICA unites 8 leading European higher education institutions to create the next generation European university. One of the primary goals of CIVICA is to connect these 8 universities to promote the exchange of knowledge and resources for the European common good. In the first season, we brought together students, researchers, and faculty to discuss relevant topics for today's Europe. Over 6 successful episodes, we brought together 22 guests from 8 CIVICA partner universities to discuss the most pressing topics in contemporary Europe. Following the extraordinary support from the audience, we wanted to continue the work of building a platform where diverse European minds come together to discuss issues that shape Europe. In the second season, we zoom into CIVICA's research focus areas. For CIVICA, research is one of the key instruments to achieve its long-term goal of creating shared European knowledge. CIVICA research focus areas have been carefully chosen in consultation with partner universities to reflect present and future challenges in Europe. CIVICA has 4 research focus areas. The very first, societies in transition and crisis of Earth. Second, challenges to the democracy in the 21st century. Number 3, Europe Revisited. Fourth and final, data-driven technologies for the social sciences. Thanks to the newly launched project CIVICA Research, the Alliance will continue to deepen its collaborations in research around these major areas. I'm your host, Aniket Narawad, a first-year Master of Public Policy student at Hertie School, Berlin. For this season, we have chosen current topics aligned with these focus areas of CIVICA research. We talked to researchers and faculty members from the 8 CIVICA partner universities to bring you cutting-edge European research in social sciences. To further understand the research in CIVICA, in this episode, I speak with Guillaume Plantin, Vice President for Research at Sciences Po Paris, and Xymena Kurowska, an Associate Professor in the Department of International Relations at Central European University. Both Professor Plantin and Professor Kurowska are part of CIVICA's permanent design team, which aims to shape the research agenda for the Alliance. In this episode, we talk about CIVICA research, its focus areas, and how CIVICA research aims to support European institutions and European community in the coming times. So Europe has a long tradition of higher education for centuries now. As a result, we have excellent universities across Europe. Why do you think there is a need for a new university, CIVICA, the European University of Social Sciences? Professor Guillaume, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So it's true that Europe has a very long tradition, but it's my personal opinion here. I think post-research universities of the 20th centuries have been more American ones. And what we need to think about is what the universities of the 21st century will be. How global will they be? How integrated will they be at the European level? And I think CIVICA is the first step towards experimenting genuine European universities that spread and are integrated all across Europe.
Professor Xymena, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, sure. So I can only reinforce this point, how important it is to think about greater integration, but also kind of differentiated integration in the sense that we have now this space or this possibility to be and work with difference also across Europe through integrating and through bringing in synergies. And universities in Europe, as great as they are, obviously they're also known for certain, let's say, for working a little bit in silos. And this type of project, this type of integration and being exposed on the daily basis to the way your colleagues work, that is a major change, I think. It's the right timing.
Talking about on the same points, like Professor Guillaume mentioned that we need universities that are relevant for the 21st century. If you look at CIVICA's structure of the CIVICA, it doesn't rely on its own infrastructure, but it in fact collaborates with different universities to build up a new university. It's almost like the structure of the European Union, where the universities act like the member states and the CIVICA acts like the EU. In a way, it's a loose comparison. Could you help us understand the structure of CIVICA? Professor Guillaume, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So it's not a bad comparison, actually, the European Union. I think our purpose is, well, very much like the European Union in its infancy, is to be very pragmatic. So we try to start working on things that we know are going to work. The researchers of Civica already, for many of them, know each other. They know they can build teams together to apply for Civica calls for projects. They know they can organize seminars. So we start with this light structure, the light governance, the permanent design team that runs Civica Research, and we try to get simple things done. We try to get each other. We also start thinking about the longer run. How could we integrate further? How could we go towards a more unified faculty? But we take baby steps in that direction. It's not a top-bottom construction. It's really starting from the substance, starting from doing stuff that we know how to do, and be ready to go further along if things work out well, which is the case for now.
Professor Xymena, could you touch upon how these 8 universities come together and what is the role of Civica and different universities here?
Yeah, how they come together, and linking back to what Guillaume also said, that the comparison or the analogy with the European project is a good one, but I think we are even innovating on that in the sense that precisely this kind of bottom-up approach and working organically together and figuring things out is, well, in a way, I think innovation also to that. How we come together, as mentioned, a lot of us, we have met each other in different networks across different communities. And now we have a possibility to work more closely and figure out how to synergize better. Guillaume is probably more privy to the history of the project and how the 8 universities really came together, what was the trajectory. I'm working more with daily practices of how we try to take it forward.
Yeah, so if I can add something on that, the initial project of European universities was really to build alliances, that is, not building right away European universities, but help universities within the European Union to remain themselves while building some links. And with Civica, within that framework, we've made a slightly more ambitious step because we're the only alliance with very homogeneous universities. We all exclusively research universities in social sciences focused on a small number of disciplines and scientific activities. And we thought initially, at least I did, that this homogeneity, the fact that we already know each other and might help us go further away than a mere alliance, doing some things together and maybe integrate further if things work out well.
Professor Xymena has mentioned that how universities previously used to work in silos, and now Civica is an opportunity, like a systematic structure to collaborate without any hindrances. This creates a different platform to easily connect with each other. Research and higher education goes hand in hand, and the research that is necessary to support the European Union, research that is necessary to support the new governance structure or the policy making, Civica is supporting that. How do you think the research, the collaborative nature of research is better because of Civica? Professor Xymena?
Well, I mean, the first thing that really comes to my mind is that there is also the enthusiasm and commitment to integrate and to be together and to take it forward. And with this commitment and the reliance of different experiences, we can implement it better. So when I said that universities are known for working in silos, of course they are known in the sense that whoever worked at university, also at university administrations, I mean, each kind of institution is in a way must be inward looking. But this initiative, this building infrastructure basically from scratch, infrastructure in the sense of joint infrastructure, and then trying to scale it up, even perhaps as an example for other alliances, that really changes the university itself and the nature of research. And in the, let's say, midterm, we are still constrained with certain institutional structures, and we have to be because we cannot transcend them, still this commitment to work together and commitment of all the institutions to facilitate it, I think that it breaks through this silos culture. Including maybe the what Europe is also known, which is the focus on national academic cultures. We have a lot of researchers that can now circulate and collect experience, but also open up national academia, and perhaps also to newer opportunities and more opportunities for junior scholars, which is an obstacle for junior researchers' careers at the moment.
Professor Guillaume, just moving on the same point, we talked about how the CIVICA is providing a platform which was not there before, giving us opportunity to easily circulate the research, circulate the knowledge, people, and also resources across different universities in Europe. How do you think this is going to shape the European academic and research space in generally?
Well, I fully subscribe to what Xymena said, but I think there are two dimensions in which we can stop working in silos. First, there are very important disciplinary silos. Economists work with economists and sociologists with sociologists, etc. And we've organized CIVICA not around disciplines, but around teams, 4 important teams. Xymena is in charge of one of them. So we committed to an interdisciplinary or at least pluridisciplinary approach from scratch. I think it's a very important commitment. That's not always easy to do, but the payoff is large. And the other point is that the 8 members of CIVICA have all been pioneers in their home country in terms of internationalization of faculty, students, etc. And so I think that CIVICA Research is a way to lever up on that and accelerate the move towards truly integrated European higher integration. So that's how I see it, as an accelerator and amplifier of efforts that the members of CIVICA have already done for several years individually.
So you mentioned there are 4 major research areas of CIVICA: societies in transition and crisis of Earth, challenges of democracy in the 21st century, Europe revisited, data-driven technologies for social sciences. Professor Guillaume, could you please briefly touch upon the thought process behind why these topics were chosen and how they are relevant for the European community?
Sure. So I'll quickly leave the floor to Xymena because she's in charge of one of the teams, the one on the future of European construction. I guess, as I said, our motivation was to go interdisciplinary from scratch and to start from questions that matter to all European, actually, not only European, but to citizens from all over the world, and see how research can address that.
Moving on to the next question, as Professor Guillaume mentioned, Professor Xymena focuses on one of the major themes here, Europe Revisited. Instead of going through all 4 themes, we would like to touch upon one of these themes, which is your theme. And we would like to understand what is the thought process behind choosing this, and maybe go a little bit detail about what exactly is the goal of doing this research.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting process that we have been in a way confronted with, and also as a challenge, and also kind of the kind of space that we were given to give substance or thematize these themes, so to say, because these themes were really at the beginning initially identified as important areas, but they were not meticulously kind of detailed what this involves. And it was up to the researchers across the consortium to sit together and to think through what these themes actually involve. I am facilitating the Europe Revisited theme, and we initially had a lot of meetings in-house how to think about defining these themes. And we then have representatives from each university in each group, and it took us quite a while to define what, in our case, Europe Revisited, what it might cover. And we went, of course, we are very interdisciplinary, so the coverage is really significant. And just to take you through these few topics that we singled out for us, the first is multi-level governance of migration. Of course, migration is also a transversal topic across these themes, and many topics actually are, but migration is of course crucial. How we think about migration in Europe, more traditionally, institutionally, but also from a societal point of view, and also what it means for processes of racialization and gendering. We also take this into account. So when we say multi-level governance of migration, it may sound like an institutionalist take on the issue, but it also includes really the societal rethinking of how European Union in particular can think of migration, and migration being part of its identity, and how to make the topic of migration also more inclusive. We also have focused on the topic of constitutional resilience of the European Union. And here, of course, this relates to issues of rule of law and how the also legal setup of the European Union, how it's been kind of challenged on a number of accounts, both by newer and older member states and societal forces, and how this can be maybe even rejuvenated. So we chose the concept of constitutional resilience, which may mean at first sight that it's like bouncing back to the old. But by resilience, we also mean how this constitutionalism can be rethought in European Union. And that is also a kind of wave to the interdisciplinary legal research across the consortium. We have a lot of researchers working on the relations of EU with the rest of the world, so to say. So that's also our topic from different perspectives. I'm particularly interested in the global governance of the internet and how European Union has been contributing to this diplomatically, but also in regulatory terms, and how we can also think about this issue ethically, which is again part of the data-driven technologies for the social sciences thinking as well. So you see how transversal these topics also are, even if we give a little bit of a different emphasis on them in each of the themes. And an important thing, the important topic in our theme is also green values and green economy in the European Union. That is perhaps approached a little bit more from the economic point of view, and Bocconi University has been particularly contributing on this topic. And as many of us within these themes, we are actually also academic teachers, if not all of us, we have thought that an important dimension would be to think about interdisciplinary approaches in European Union focused social science and humanities. So we also want to think precisely about how we can think about methodological innovation for EU studies.
Thank you very much. As you know, this podcast is also a platform of CIVICA where we try to reflect what CIVICA is trying to do. So in this season also, we're trying to touch upon immigration, climate crisis, also politics in Europe, what's happening in Europe, all these things. So thank you very much for touching upon that. CIVICA is a new university, and it also gives us different opportunity to change certain things that were not available before. So often academia is perceived as distance from the reality for several reasons. How is CIVICA approaching its research so that it can support the contemporary issues like we briefly touched upon so far? But how is it specifically targeting so that the research becomes more relevant, the research becomes more useful for the contemporary issues? Professor Guillaume?
Well, to make our research as readily available as possible to society at large, I'd say there are several features of CIVICA that are important. First, as we said, building a research program on 4 important themes, not as a more academic division across disciplines, but building from these themes should structure our work towards more immediately relevant stuff. Second, as you know, CIVICA research is run in close coordination with the Erasmus program of CIVICA, which is much oriented towards teaching. And the first diffusion for researcher is, as Xymena said, our teaching. And a lot of our research activities are directly geared towards teaching. And finally, significant part of our budget and our effort in research also aims at diffusion. For example, allocated lots of resources to communication and diffusion, which is run by you at Hertie, and we decided to do that from scratch. And we also have a number of broad audience events beyond standard, more academic seminars. So I'd say that quick and broad diffusion is in the DNA of CIVICA Research.
So just talking about on the same lines, again, CIVICA being a new university, it also has an opportunity to eliminate some of the things research is trying to struggle, like the gender disbalance in research, the lack of inclusivity and diversity in research. This also provides a platform much more to collaborate and make multidisciplinary research. Professor Xymena, would you like to touch upon briefly what are the principles of CIVICA Research and CIVICA as a university also that is going to be different than the universities before?
I think certain declarations are very clear and necessary to implement, but in our case, we are really implementing them in the sense that the way we think about events, it's becoming kind of natural that there's diversity, both gender and ethnic diversity, that it is including, so that it's representative of European societies. But also at the more maybe technical but an extremely significant level, the call for research proposals that we launched and now concluded, and the successful projects are now soon to be launched. We really paid attention both in the formulation of the call and in the way we interacted with the proposals, that these considerations, again, to represent actually European societies, how they are, rather than only certain groups, that this principle is reflected in the way we evaluated the proposals. So that was basically a criterion for us. But again, this is certainly daily work. So the more we can streamline this sensibility, the better. And I think this. So there will be these technical criteria that seem kind of dry, but are extremely significant in terms of shaping the institutional landscape and the daily work of how we also integrate young researchers from different backgrounds. I'm not saying anything new, I think, because we are kind of on the same page with it. But the difference can be that this is part of our daily sensibility.
Thank you very much. Professor Guillaume, you worked on CIVICA project for a long time now. Could you help us understand, what are the specific steps that were taken to include more interdisciplinary or include more diversity, or how are you planning to make it different, this university, than the other universities in terms of the principles?
Well, in terms of diversity, to follow up on Ximena's points, right from scratch, an important number of tasks within CIVICA include best practice sharing in terms of academic human resources. How do we hire? How do we make sure that discrimination in our hiring processes and that we build a balance and representative faculty? So because the culture in different European countries and the way different European countries approach these issues, they're all wary of it, but they don't deal with it the same way. It's very interesting to compare our practices, the very concrete steps that each of us take to get better along that direction, and try to build something from this best practice sharing at the CIVICA level. And regarding the interdisciplinary side, building the research program on 4 teams rather than 5 or 6 disciplines is, I believe, a strong commitment towards interdisciplinarity.
Thank you very much. Because Europe is such a diverse community with different languages, different ethnicities, coming from different countries, it's really necessary that diversity becomes key part of the university that is aiming to cater to the overall European Union, not just certain countries or one country. So that is why I think CIVICA has one of the key principles which keeps promoting unity and diversity. So going on to the last question, how would you like to see CIVICA growing up from here? One way to look at it can CIVICA become the brain behind the European Union and the communities of Europe? That's one way of looking at it. How do you think CIVICA Research and CIVICA will be supporting the European Union and the communities in the coming 10, 15, 20 years? Let's start with Professor Xymena.
Yes, I have a little bit of a dream, I think, about Civica in the sense that I would like it to be really a zone of free movement. And that would be my final kind of destination where really both researchers at different levels can go to different institutions without significant institutional hurdles, but relying on the infrastructure that we are in the process of building. So that I hope it's not utopian. I hope we can kind of reach some of it, of this idea of free movement, which is also a principle of the European Union, but still, because of the different, let's say, national hindrances, it might not be as free as it wants to appear. So perhaps we can realize this EU principle better, ideally, that it, at least at present, realizes itself. So that is, I think, the main idea of mine, long term. But really, mid-term is this integration of research, education, and civic engagement. And we are working hard on this. It's not straightforward. We are different packages that work separately and then want to, of course, integrate their work across the streams. But I think this is in terms of, let's say, an operational mechanism. That is something that we certainly want to achieve. This is how I envisage it, working at this more operational level. Although Guillaume has maybe a more bird view on Civica.
As you said, realizing the values of EU in the academic space, in the university space itself gives a lot of different opportunity. Professor Guillaume, would you like to help us understand this more?
What I like to emphasize is the social science and humanities aspect of Civica. I think we live in times since 15 or 20 years when social sciences are becoming particularly crucial. You know, when I was a student, there was the fall of the Berlin Wall. There was the start of China as a major global player. Some people mentioned the end of history, right? We knew that we took democracy and markets and globalization for granted, and that was mostly for the best. We're no longer in that world. We're in a world in which there's no such thing as business as usual. Basic concepts such as democracy, market economies, environmental quality that risk and are being challenged. So I think more than ever, we need social sciences to think about that. And at the same time, academic freedom in more or less surreptitious ways have been threatened, including in Europe. We know that all too well at Civica. So I'm very proud to be part of a strong university in social sciences because, again, we need them more than ever and more threatened than it's been for a long time, for my lifetime at least. So I hope we'll contribute to help fixing that.
Thank you very much. So we have quite difficult challenges going on right now and coming up also. So Civica is right at the time where it can respond to these challenges through its research and work. Thank you very much for joining us. This was Professor Plantin and Professor Kurowska, who helped us understand how CIVICA Research aims to change the research landscape in Europe by connecting leading social sciences universities in Europe. They also talk about some of the tangible actions CIVICA aims to take to provide research on pressing challenges for the European community. The second season of Over to Europe is produced by me, Aniket Nalawat, and edited by Ricardo Colella, Civica Associate at Hutty School, with the help of Civica Community. Music in this episode was created by Kevin MacLeod. This podcast is funded by the German Academic Exchange Service. Subscribe and learn more at www.civica.eu/over to Europe. Stay tuned for our next episode.